hurricane in Florida with Russell Gackenbach. My first question for you is to please say your name and spell it.
My name is Russell E. Gackenbach, Gackenbach.
And please tell us your place and date of birth.
I was born in Allentown, Pennsylvania, March 1923, on March 23.
Can you tell us a little bit about what kind of education you received growing up, what your parents did?
I'm the oldest of 7 children. My mother was a housewife, house tender all her life. My dad worked for Pennsylvania Power and Light Company in Allentown. I went to school in Allentown, and I graduated from high school in 1941. At that time, we were not at war yet, and I ended up getting a war job. I was working for Bethlehem Steel in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, as a young inspector of bomb and shell castings. And I had a fallout with Bethlehem Steel. They wanted me to work steady nights. I wanted to work steady days. So I told them, I'm going to enlist. Famous last words. You can enlist, but I did. And I did enter the military service in January 1943. And I got my commission as a navigator in February 1944. I flunked out of pilot training.
So, sorry, can you say one more time when you enlisted?
I enlisted in October of 42, called a service in January of 43.
And you enlisted in the Army Air Corps?
I enlisted in the Aviation Cadet Program of the Army Air Corps.
Why did you want to go into the Air Corps?
I was interested in airplanes. It's just that, such as a pilot, my coordination was off. I had a hard time landing because of depth perception, and I could not solo in 10 flight training, and then they flunked me out, sent me eventually to navigator school.
What did you learn in navigator school?
I learned how to use the stars, the moon, tides, drifts, radar, to learn how to make sure that we got from point A to point B in the required time.
Did you enjoy being in navigator school?
Yes, and I was lucky. Most navigators went to a military school and several air bases around the country. I ended up going to the University of Miami, Coral Gables, Florida, and I was taught by Pan American Airways. And the experience I had with Pan American Airways was better than the stuff we got from the regular Army military schools, because most of our training was over water. And in the final 393rd Bomb Squadron, 4 of the navigators all graduated from Pan Am on the same day.
friendly with the other people in the navigation school?
You probably had to be. Made no difference. We didn't know who was going to go where. We were just from all around the country. And we had to either learn to fly as a navigator or get washed out and go to gunnery school or be transferred from the Air Cadet program to the U.S. Army. And then came under the enlistment criterion.
Where did you go after you graduated from navigator school?
My first assignment was in B-24s in Langley Field, Virginia. I was supposed to be there for about 5 months, but I ended up being there a relatively short time.
So did you continue with your training there, or did they have you on practice missions?
From the time I got out of navigation school to the day I flew a mission there where we dropped bombs, we were training. And even then, we trained in how to drop our bombs. Our bombs are different in the 393rd than the rest of the Air Force.
So what happened after you left Langley? Where did you go next?
I went to Boca Raton, Florida. I went to radar school from 6 o'clock in the morning to noontime. Then in the afternoon, we had flight training. So we had a full training program. We just kept training. Nothing special this time. It was just a regular training. We went next to Fairmont, Nebraska. And there we were training in B-17s. Our training was pretty much complete, and we were starting to get ready to go overseas when two things happened. Overnight, some of the B-17s in the airport disappeared, and there was a brand new B-29s. The second was a rumor that the 393rd Bomb Squadron was going to be sent someplace else. And it ended up that we were transferred lock, stock, barrel from Nebraska to Salt Lake and Wendover. When we first met Colonel Tibbets, he told us we were going to be a special outfit, going to have special training, it was going to be dangerous, and told us a few more things, but did not say what we were going to do, except that there's a new bomb under development, and if successful, it could shorten the war. And he told us that it was also dangerous and going to be under tight security. If anybody did not like that, they could get out now without anything showing on their record. Otherwise, he also told us that we're going to cut from 15 crews, from 21 crews to 15 crews, and from 10 men to 9 men. And that we're not going to have any active guns in our airplane.
So how did you and the other members of the 393rd react when you heard that?
Well, we were buffaloed. We did not know what was going to happen. But what was interesting was that as soon as Colonel Tibbets was finished with his talk, he said that we each had a 10-day leave, but he did not give us the leave of his heart. We had that leave because during that time we were all investigated. And when I went home, I did not know this at that time. It was sometime later, when my grandmother died, that I got an emergency leave. That time when I went home, everybody was asking me, "What kind of trouble are you in?" I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I was, he said, telephone call, or a military man contacted me." And he said, "We just were interested in you." It turned out that they visited my minister, my Boy Scout leader, two of my teachers that I know of, and several other people to find out what kind of, shall we say, a young man I was at that time. And I evidently passed because I stayed in. Some people, when they came back to the air base, there's one man, supposedly a colonel, whose bags were packed for him, and he got off of one airplane, got on another airplane, and ended up in Alaska. This was done to let us know they're interested. There's another man who was in Chicago, and he went with his friend to a hotel for a few drinks. He was surprised when he got back to Wendover. His conversation with his friend was revealed. Turned out his friend was military intelligence. So we do know that we were all highly investigated, and we learned to do one thing: keep your mouth shut. Don't talk business. Only when you were in a facility or where it was required. But do not tell tales.
Did Colonel Tibbets and the other leaders at Wendover emphasize that?
Oh, and they never got through doing that. You occasionally had a briefing where you were told. In fact, one of them was, I didn't find out where we were going till I got up and sat at the navigator's seat. And then the map was blank except the next here and the next here. Here's where we were, here's where we were going. Secrecy was very much in favor, and everybody was careful.
What kind of training did they have you do at Wendover? Were you working with pumpkin bombs?
Well, first we were starting with regular navigation. We were, shall we say, 10 individuals, which is not what the military wanted. They wanted us to be one individual. So we just got a lot of flying where we went up to train, to learn to know what each other was thinking, how we were going to react with each other. And in our transfer from Nebraska to Wendover, we lost our bombardier. Our bombardier just didn't seem to fit in with us. And going across the country there, the co-pilot and I were told, "See the man there with the little coupe? In the next couple of days, each of you are going to ride with him for half a day. He is a potential new replacement for our bombardier." So you were always checked out, always training. And we dropped regular bombs at first. It was in May of 1944 that we got brand new B-29s. These were modified, and the other pilots on the air base could not fly ours. We had several big differences. We had reversible pitch props. We had different engines. We had fuel injection. Our Bombay in our airplane was modified for a large bomb. You can't hang a pumpkin, as you called it, on the side of a regular B-29. You had to modify it because that bomb fit the entire Bombay. We also trained in our planes to find out how good they are and how good they're going to be on our mission. So we had a lot of training missions. I spent 22 hours in one B-29 without refueling. We also flew as high as we could, 34,000 feet. It was very difficult to get up to that altitude. By the time we were at a certain place in our training, where we were considered to be ready to go overseas, we had special missions, and on July 20th and 26th, I think it is, we flew to Japan and we dropped what was known as pumpkin bombs.
This was in 1945?
This is 1945.
So how long were you at Wendover for?
We went over in September of 43 and stayed there until we went overseas.
So that's a pretty long time to be at Wendover.
Yes, it was, but training.
How did you and the other members of the 393rd react when you first got to Wendover, seeing as it's rather in the middle of nowhere?
We didn't like the air base because it was the edge of the salt desert and the Utah-Nevada border. All you saw was sand, racks of various kinds, but very little vegetation. It was desolate. And it was easy to get lost. But as long as we did our training and did as we were supposed to and travel, we were lucky. Weekends we could go into Salt Lake City.
And what would you do there?
Relax, take it easy, get a date, go to a movie, eat in the Hotel Utah, visit with some friends if you had any in that area.
When you went to Salt Lake City, did you have to wear your military uniform or could you wear civilian clothes?
We always wore military uniforms. No military, I don't know if anybody had any civilian clothing with them as a flyer. And believe it or not, we were even segregated at the different airfields. The enlisted men were part of the air base. The lieutenants were a different part, adjacent to the pilots and co-pilots. But there was still some camaraderie that had to be developed. But things worked out very well. And we thought we were one of the hot shots as far as our training was concerned.
What was your rank at the time?
Second lieutenant.
Were,
As long as you were in the training command, you were not eligible for advancement. And all of our training was in the training command.
when you were in Salt Lake City, did anyone ever ask what you were doing in the military, and what would you answer?
Well, one Saturday night, my co-pilot and I were walking down one of the main streets in Salt Lake City. We were actually looking for a restaurant. And we were stopped by two men who had captain's bars. And they asked us where we were from. I was going, sorry, sir, name, rank, and serial number only. And they finally let us go. So even at that stage of training, we were still being watched.
How did you react when you first saw the modified B-29s? Were you and the other crew members impressed by them?
When we received our first B-29, we were amazed. But after we got the new ones in May, they were better than the first ones we had. We did not have any problem with the engines like they did with the first batch of B-29s. But we had hope, and we knew we had some real good airplanes.
Who were some of the members in your crew, and did you become friendly with them?
Oh, we became very close to each other. And I was in contact with most of them after the war, especially with George Marquardt, who was the airplane commander. I had to pay a business visit to the area. I got in contact with him. I saw him at several reunions. Strudwick, the bombardier, he came to several reunions. Guy Anderson, the co-pilot, I was Pennsylvanian. He was Pennsylvanian. We only lived about 60 miles apart. I saw him several times after the war. And at various times, I was either in phone contact or they came to reunions that we still went together, because most of my crew was from the Northeast.
So you and the crew meshed together very well.
Yes, we did.
Were you friendly with the mechanics crew as well, or was it mostly the plane crew that you?
The flyers were mostly friendly with the other crews. Once we went overseas, in my hut I was in, there was just 2 crews. We had very little with the ground crew. They had their job to do, we had ours. But we knew some of them. We did not know exactly what they did, and you didn't ask questions. I had a big surprise when I got back to the United States. I was in the hotel, seeing those who were going home. And all of a sudden, there's a tap on my shoulder. Turn around. Brother high school grad. He was in the 509th all the time. We didn't know it. And there was others that were the same. When it came time to go home, that's when you found out who did what and where you fitted it in.
Were you and your crew regularly assigned to a certain B-29?
Originally, we could fly any B-29, and we did not have any special assignments. We did get special B-29s in May of 44, May of 45. At that time, we were assigned to a special B-29, and we also had a special ground crew. And then that was our only real contact with the other than flyers.
What was the name of your plane, and when was it named?
Well, we had 1 or 2 or 3 names for our airplane. And there was no identification on our airplane except our tail number. We were not allowed, at that time to put any nose art on our airplane. And or the B-17s were all painted military green or gray, whatever you want to call it. Our planes were all bright, shiny aluminum. When the first time anybody had anything in their plane was on the day of the mission to Hiroshima, when Tibbets had the name Enola Gay painted on his plane. We were only allowed to put ours on starting the next day.
Can you tell us about the flight from Wendover to Tinian? And did you go anywhere else? I know some flights were first sent to Cuba for navigation training.
Well, virtually all of us went to Cuba.
So you did go to Cuba?
We spent almost a month in Cuba. Again, navigation training for navigators, bombing training for the bombardiers, and pilot training for the pilots, and so forth. We were sharp, and Tibbets wanted us to be always sharp and ready.
What was it like to be in Cuba during the war?
Well, most of the time we were up in the air or in ground school. Because again, we did not know who was watching us or testing us out. So again, it was keep your lips sealed. I know I met a friend or two, got distant relative overseas. All I could do was say I'm in those B-29s.
Did you have any time to go and see part of Cuba or just socialize?
We, on weekends, we had no duty. We could go into Havana or elsewhere. I ended up meeting a girl. So the first Saturday night we were at the air base, we went into the officers' club, and my pilot had a little bit too much to drink, and he was starting to make a pass at this one young girl. So the co-pilot came up and says, "I'll handle George, you handle the woman." So we broke them up, and after that I saw her once or twice more while we were in Cuba. By the way, she was an American woman.
She was an American.
Yes.
Did you find the navigation training in Cuba to be helpful?
Knowing that we were going to be going over to the Pacific, we knew it was going to be very helpful. Because with those co-pilots, those navigators who trained for the military, they had a hard time at first getting ready to say we know how to navigate properly. One thing to remember is that during World War II, we didn't have GPS. It was all dead reckoning navigation. Moon, stars, radar, Loran. Radar and Loran were in their infancy. You had the tides. So it was quite some guesswork to do. You had to be sharp. You couldn't take a slack moment.
Who do you think had the hardest job on the plane? It sounds like being a navigator was really important.
Well, the bombardier, we were lucky. I had a little bombardier training, and our bombardier had a little navigation training. So it worked out pretty nice for us. I don't know who had a tough job. At first, when it came to flying the airplane, all the enlisted men but one had an easy job. The flight engineer could either be an officer or an enlisted man. We had an enlisted man. He had a hard job. He could do everything but almost fly that airplane. In fact, I know he had some hours behind the wheel. But that was after some work was done. He went on to check out. But I spent some time on the wheel. So did the bombardier.
Were most members of the crew enlisted men or officers?
4 officers, the rest were enlisted men. Some crews had 5 officers because of the flight engineer.
Did that make any difference in how the crew meshed together?
No, made no difference. We all got along. We all had gripes at various times. All felt we weren't treated right, but paid off at the end.
So now maybe you can tell us a little bit about the flight to Tinian. Where did you fly from and how long did it take?
Well, I'll start off by saying that in our first 2 missions to Japan, we all started the same way. And the missions to after the new bomb came out, still the basic same thing. We took off from Tinian and flew to Iwo Jima. You normally flew individually, meaning the Enola Gay, Great Artiste, the necessary Evo. We flew individually, but we took off within a limited time span. And we flew individually. We met up at Iwo Jima, and then we joined the V formation. We became the 3rd plane. Then we flew off the wing of the Enola Gay until we got to our aiming point. At the aiming point, the first 2 planes, the Enola Gay, the Great Artiste, turned in toward the city of Hiroshima. Those in the 3rd plane, and we did have a stranger on board, stayed behind, and we made a 360-degree turn. When we came out of that turn, we were about 4 minutes, plus or minus 15 seconds, behind the Enola Gay and the Great Artiste. We were flying on that heading toward the city of Hiroshima when a radio went dead. That was on purpose, because that radio, when it went dead, told us 2 things. Doors open, bomb gone. And we continued toward the city of Hiroshima. Meanwhile, the other 2 planes, Great Artiste and the Enola Gay, turned to a special heading and flew as fast as they could away from the city. Meanwhile, my plane was headed toward the city. When that radio went dead, the scientists aboard our airplane started a stopwatch. At some point, according to his stopwatch, he pushed a button on the camera that was mounted in our nose. And the photographs were then taken of the explosion of the bomb in front of us while the others were going away. And when I was up on the flight deck, I was timing the turn away, the extra circle we made. And as soon as the flash died down, I went to my navigator's desk, picked up my personal camera, and shot 2 pictures out of the left side of the airplane by the navigator's table. Then we were told, and it's the only clue we had that things were different, was there'll be a cloud. Don't go through it, go around it. And that we found out later on was a safety precaution for us. And we did not know at that time. Because most of the flight crews, what we did that day was not that important or special. Because we all were going through the training for that. All we know that was changed that day was I substituted bomb B for bomb A. And it was only the next day that I found out bomb A was, or bomb B was the atomic bomb.
So what did the mushroom cloud look like?
It was very hard to explain. Because first it starts off, it's just 2,000 feet high approximately. Straight up. Then she starts blossoming out. You see all sorts of colors in there. And by the time we got near the city of Hiroshima, the bomb was higher than we were. The bomb blast was higher than we were. And it's just like you see in the photographs. It's very hard to explain.
How high were you flying at that point?
31,000 feet. And we were about 15, 16 miles from the city of Hiroshima. And the pictures I took were taken about 1 minute after detonation.
And so that makes them very unique photos, from what I understand. What's so unique about them?
There's no other pictures of the bomb, either atomic bomb taken that early that we have. I took 2 photographs. One got away from me. Where it is, I don't know. But about 5 years ago, it was offered for sale in England, and it was put up for sale by an American company. It was not taken. It was put on a little bit later, and it was offered asking price $50,000. The other one is safe. I put it at my university, and it's in the archives.
Do you, when the bomb detonated, were you instructed to wear goggles?
Oh yes, we did wear, we wore welder's goggles. And also, we had 3 of those to our plane. That was when we went through the sound barrier.
Could you still see how bright the light was through the welder's goggles?
I've been quoted as saying that I made the remark that if I would have had a small print Bible, I could have read it without difficulty.
That's how bright the light was?
That's how bright the light was.
What did you think when you saw the light and then saw the mushroom cloud? Did you realize how different this bomb was?
Well, yeah, we realized the difference, but we didn't know its makeup. We did not know what it could or could not do. It took a couple days before we had an assessment of the damage.
How do you remember how your other crew members reacted to the light or the mushroom cloud?
Well, normally when you're up there flying, you're worried about getting to the target. After you drop your load, you're worried about getting home. So going up, it's just business as usual. After the bomb was dropped, we were stunned. And then on the way home, you hardly said a word or heard a word spoken. You were very quiet. This time you're normally out there laughing, hey, we got another one. We only got 3 more to go to get our 25, or hey, since we got it close to the target within 3 minutes, you owe me a beer, or something like things like that. None of that. It was all solemn business.
You all recognize that this was a pretty big deal.
Yes. We were surprised on the return to see all the people around runway A. There was also a crowd on runway A before takeoff, but we did not see that because we took off from runway C. Coming back, I don't know about runway on there, but it made no difference. We went to our parking spot, which we didn't do the first time. And we saw this revelry going on. And we did not fully understand until we saw the photographs.
And what plane were you on for the Hiroshima mission?
The necessary evil.
What was the celebration like when you got back? Were you part of it, or was it more centered on the Enola Gay?
Most of the activity was around the Enola Gay and its parking spot. On my plane, we were taken by a bus to a debriefing room, had our debriefing, given us our shot if you wanted it. That is a shot of liquor. And that was it. We were dismissed. And with the rest of the revelry going on, I have no idea what and how long.
Did you get a special meal afterwards, or you just went to sleep?
That I can't answer. I don't know.
So just to back up a little bit, can you tell us about when you first got to Tinian and some of the just regular combat missions that you flew before the atomic bombing missions?
My crew only flew 2 missions prior to the one on August 6th. And those were on the 20th, either the 26th or 27th of July. And those were 10,000-pound bombs filled with explosives.
Do you remember where those were dropped or what cities you had targeted?
I'd have to go back in the records to be sure.
What was life like for the 509th on Tinian during that period?
Well, in one way you could say we were called the laughing stock, because we always went when the other planes were down, and when we went up, they stayed down. They always said the 509th is winning the war, but by not going with the rest of them. But we stuck with our bomb while the other B-29s could not get up as high as we were in a reasonable time. So they dropped mainly from 5,000 to 10,000 feet, and they dropped fire bombs at the end. We did not drop any fire bombs. Their training was entirely different than 509th training.
Did the mood change toward the the 509th after the bombing of Hiroshima?
Yes, but didn't change that much. And everybody's getting ready for more training until the second one came along. So we didn't lose any time in our training program.
When did you find out about the first mission? Did they give you a briefing the day before?
We had a special mission, a special session briefing. Well, actually, we had one in July, but they didn't tell us what it was. We were shown, first we had to be identified to go in, identified to come out. We had to empty our pockets. They showed us some photographs of target areas, but nothing real, definitive, that we could say this is fine. It was attended by the bombardier, co-pilot, the pilot, and one enlisted man. It was a radar operator.
Were you present at that briefing?
Yes, but we didn't really know, but we were told, keep your mouth shut. But we don't know what value that had at that time. To this day, it was a little strange. And we couldn't find out if anybody else did this.
And so the briefing the day before, did they give you more information?
We got the usual information that we had for every mission to Japan. The only piece of information that I remember them talking about was, since it's a new bomb, do not fly through the cloud. There's nothing more definitive than that. That's all I seem to remember from that mission.
Were you told then what the targets were supposed to be?
Oh, during our regular briefings, we were told. Primary was in Hiroshima, then Kokura, then Nagasaki. Then we were told that the mission on the night of August 5.
Was everybody present for that briefing, or was it just a few of the crews?
To my knowledge, the whole crew. We had our regular group briefing, then we had a special navigation training, special for bombardiers, for flight engineers.
And you said your navigation map looked rather different for the Hiroshima mission? That it just had an X and then...
No, that was for one of the that was one of the training missions I
Oh,
had.
okay.
No, we were told the coordinates, this one.
So how long before takeoff was the briefing?
Well, it's actually two. One was around 10 o'clock on the 5th. Short, not much information. You could nap, eat, do what you want. Then there was a meeting around 2 o'clock in the morning. This is where we got the latest. And there's one thing that was special for our group over there. There's erratic winds over the Japanese Empire. Tibbets and his staff did not like the forecasts that came out of Guam. So Tibbets sent up 3 airplanes to observe the weather at the primary, secondary, and tertiary target. And then additionally, they sent up another plane as a standby plane in case something happened to the Enola Gay. That plane went to Iwo Jima.
But the winds didn't really end up being a problem.
Oh yes, you went through quite a few levels going down. You just hope that everything was simple at that. You could not predict where the bomb was going to go. You thought you were right on target. You were not.
So at the August 5th briefing, was that when you found out you would be a necessary evil?
I'm not sure if it's the earlier one or that one. I'm inclined to say it was on the first one.
And it was on August 5th or 6th that Colonel Tibbets had the Enola Gay painted with its famous name.
Correct.
Do you remember the reaction to that?
No, the colonel finally put a name on his plane. Didn't surprise us. May have surprised some. But one person who was very, very surprised, that was the co-pilot. He said, "This is my plane." The colonel says, "It's my plane."
And you said at that point, none of the other planes had any art or
That's
names
right.
on it.
That's correct.
What was the reason for that? For security purposes?
All security. After all, there's still a lot of Japs on the island, and they were communicating with the Empire.
Did you ever see any of the other Japanese on the island or the prisoners of war on Tinian?
I saw what we call the Gook plant, or camp. That was the natives were put in a special compound area. Occasionally you saw a prisoner, but that was rare.
And it was feared that they were still communicating with the Empire or that some of the people who hadn't been captured yet were.
We knew there was someone there. Every now and then, they reported they caught a Jap the other night.
I understand that there were a lot of crashes by B-29s on takeoff on Tinian. Were you and your crew members afraid of that?
I had to explain it 2 different ways. Before May, when we were flying a regular B-29, they were a problem. After May, when we got our new engines, no problem. At least we didn't worry about it. I don't know what the pilot was thinking about. Nothing's ever said.
Did you see any B-29s crash on takeoff on Tinian?
The first couple nights we were there, one went off the end of the runway. And my airplane commander, George Marquardt, on one of the pumpkin raids, he substituted on another airplane because the airplane commander got sick. And he was one of the lucky ones. He came in with dead engine, but it ended properly. But he did not even know he was on fire. It was the tar that told him he was on fire. So he landed safely.
Were you and your crew surprised that you were assigned to the necessary evil instead of your usual plane? Did that cause any consternation, or was that?
No problem. Our planes, 25, were so identical. A pilot could go from plane A to plane B, C, D, or E without any difficulty. So we were safe about that. We had no concerns. In fact, the reason we got into the necessary evil is that our plane flew the day before, and it had to go to maintenance for 24-hour checks before it could be flyable again. And it's the way the Air Force is set up today. The day you come back from day after you come back from a mission, your plane is checked over. The other innovation that Tibbets came up with, each plane had its own ground crew. The rest of it off. Big job went to central maintenance.
Can you tell us now about the lead up to the second mission, the Nagasaki mission? When did you find out about that there would be a second atomic bombing mission?
Well, first of all, I don't know that they told us, but we assumed, since we were trained for special missions, that it was going to be another atomic bomb. As it turned out, my crew from the Up and Atom was selected to be the weather ship over Kokura, which was the target. Again, our regular plane was out of service, being checked over. And we did, I put it this way, I found Kokura. My navigation was correct for that day. That was always a relief when you found your target. And the one plane out of I'm trying to think of the name of this thing. Was the boxcar was the one dropped. That mission had a few costly errors in it that affected our program, but did not affect my plane at all.
And which one for the Nagasaki mission?
The Enola Gay.
And you were with Captain Marquardt and your usual crew?
That's correct.
I understand that on the way to Kokura, one of the planes didn't show up at the rendezvous, and that caused a delay. Were you there at the rendezvous, or had you already gone on to Kokura?
Well, I didn't want to mention that, but yeah, we know it was one crew didn't make it, and on top of that, that same airplane had a tank full of gas, which it could not transfer. They were supposed to get to their area, spend no more than 15 minutes there. They were searching for almost 45 minutes before they left Iwo Jima for the target area.
And at that point, were you already at Kokura, or were you also waiting for the plane?
When we were a weather ship, we took off 1 hour early from the strike planes. And we were only supposed to be away about an hour to head back home. So things just didn't work great on that second one. First mission went like clockwork.
What did you find when you got to Kokura?
Limited clouds, but there was, the word went back, bomb primary. But by the time the strike plane got there, it was either smoke from a raid the previous day or the cloud cover that moved over. And that made that they could not see the ground, because the orders were to drop the bomb visually, not by radar.
And so that's why they had to move on to Nagasaki?
Then they moved on to Nagasaki. By that time, they were low on fuel. Also at Nagasaki, cloud covers coming in, and they just had to be very careful what they did so that they could get to Okinawa, which was close airfield or place of landing for the U.S. forces.
And did your plane turn around after sending the weather report back from Kokura?
Yes, we made our observation and got out of the area and headed home.
Do you have any idea about why do you think the second mission had more problems than the first mission? Was it just pure luck, or were there things that could have been done?
Probably human error. They didn't follow the flight plan the way they were supposed to. Because, as I said before, the weather over the islands is very fickle.
Was Colonel Tibbets upset that they hadn't followed the flight plan? Do you know?
I have no idea. Because I don't even remember a debriefing for the second one.
Was there a celebration after Nagasaki or just after Hiroshima?
Just after Hiroshima.
And
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
The number of planes on the second raid were not as many as on the first raid. But the 3 strike planes had problems.
In either mission, did the Japanese notice the B-29s and shoot flak at you, or was it pretty clear sailing on both?
We were never targeted by the ground crews the Japanese, nor were we subjected to flak. We never saw flak, my crew.
And I guess the cloud cover over Kokura, that's what's led to the term the luck of Kokura. Is that correct? That it was spared that day?
Right. I don't know which airfield I was at. I was signee. Fellow pulled me over. He says, "You saved my life." He said, "What do you mean?" He says, "I saw your plane up there. And it went by." He said, well, it turned out that he was a prisoner of war. He was in a prison camp. He was finally put aboard a derelict boat, taken up to the area of Kokura. And he was a slave laborer in the steel mill. And they saw us go by. They said, "You saved our lives." And that was a little hard moment to live.
When did you find out that it was an atomic bomb that had been dropped?
August 7, when the daily newspaper came out. There's just a little notice in there. Well, I think I still have a copy of that notice.
Did you understand what an atomic bomb was, or did the newspaper article explain it?
I was never sure of what they meant by an atomic bomb at first. After all, I was only a high school grad. Some who had more education than I did surmised that it was atomic, but we didn't tell each other, we didn't know. Again, as I say, the crew sort of stuck together. Even the enlisted men in their barracks were together rather than spread out. So it was just gesture, and the papers were scarce. You had to go by radio, and even that, nobody knew what the word atomic meant at that time. The only thing I knew was the atomic number.
When did you see photos of what the bomb had done to Hiroshima?
A couple of days later, there was some photos displayed. And it astounded us how much damage was done by them.
How did you feel about that at the time?
At that time, we had to go out and kill every one of them.
Has your thoughts changed over the years?
No, we were at war. They started it. It was our turn to finish it, and we did. And we saved lots of lives, both in our military and in their military. And if they would not have capitulated when they did, there'll be some more atomic bombs coming along.
When did you find out that the Japanese had surrendered?
I don't remember. That I can't answer.
Was there, do you remember if there was a celebration when the surrender was announced or later on?
I know we were happy because that meant we were going home. More than that, I don't remember.
Did any members of the 509th participate in this surrender for the USS Missouri?
I don't know. If there was one, I don't know about it.
Did the Enola Gay participate in the flyover?
I always tell people that I was the last one to fly the Enola Gay in combat. That was August 9th. The Enola Gay did fly in the flyover on the signing of the peace treaty and what have you. So they did fly. And shortly after the bombs were dropped, all we heard was the word, we're going back to the States and we're going to practice.
So when did you go back to the States then?
Virtually everybody in the 509th was not covered and did not obey the points you were supposed to have to get out of the service. Tibbets just picked up the whole shebang, the whole 509th. We got aboard airplanes and boats and came over to the States. We went to Texas. And as fast as we could, we wanted to go home. I actually signed up to stay in. I was thinking of making it a career. However, in April of '46, the executive officer called me in, told me, we don't need you anymore. So they said, you can resign or we can resign for you. If we resign for you, you're out, period. If you resign, you're in the reserves. Well, I signed up to stay in. And I went home and went to college. However, in 1951, guess what? They wanted to be 29 navigators. But I didn't have to go. I appealed my request for immediate release, and I got it. I went home and gave no more thought about making the military my career.
So when you were navigating on the combat missions and the atomic bombing missions, did you just have to get them to the city, or did you have to get them to the exact aim point?
My job was to get them to the city. After that, it was the bombardiers. He was at the bomb site, and he was looking down and at the maps and what have you. And he'd say, oh, we're supposed to be here, and you're over here. But that was not a real big problem. Because even though they knew you were supposed to be over here, and you were over here, but the bomb might have landed someplace in between, just because of the winds.
Did the bombardiers use the Norden bomb site for missions like that?
Yes, my bomber used the Norden bomb site.
Did they consider that to be very reliable and helpful?
It was a good technology, but remember, no GPS.
outside of all the missions you were flying, did you have any time to socialize either within the 509th or with the other?
Oh, we had movies every night. The officer club was open. I had no problem with that. You could visit if you had somebody. Somebody from another outfit wanted to come into our area. So, I had a distant relative. He called me up first, came over. I had to go to the gate and watch for him, then he could come in. But after the war was over, that all changed. Things got away from military as quick as they could.
So security became a little more lax?
Well, I don't know how much security there was afterwards. One thing that baffles me, the colonel knew I took photographs. To this day, nobody said anything. I have them. I had them.
That's very interesting because I know General Groves tried to confiscate Harold Agnew's photos that he took, and Agnew insisted on keeping a copy.
And that was scientists. So what their rules were compared to ours, I had no idea. But I made a deal with our intelligence officer that I always flew with a camera. And he kind of, well, I'll tell you what. He said, how are you getting them developed? And I'm doing the developing. Where? Squadron lab. He said, well, any photograph you take out of that lab, I would like to see. And the only one he took of me was an early picture of a lone B-29 up in the air that showed no guns. He kept that for about 2 weeks, gave it back to me. But the atomic ones, just like I told you, told them. In fact, I was waiting for them to come to ask. I wasn't going to give them to them. They had to request them. I told them they were mine. I didn't know they would be valuable or not. They're not that. They were offered for 50. Whether they were actually sold or not, I have no idea.
How did you get into photography?
First photographs I ever delivered or developed was done in a photo lab. And all the guy who ran the lab says, let in this solution for so long, your ends up putting this solution. It was easy.
Did you take photos in any of the other combat or atomic missions that you flew?
Well, there's only the two. I took no photographs. I was too far away. I did not see anything at Nagasaki, so there's nothing for me to take.
So when you got back after the war, what university did you go to and what did you study?
I went to Lehigh in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Started out as a chemical engineer. But by then, 2 semesters, I transferred to metallurgical engineering. Well, there's 2 reasons for that. With my experience before I went into service, working in the steel mill. The other was that one of the professors and one of the candidates for a PhD were giving me a hard time. And one day I confronted them. And it turned out both knew each other quite well because they were at Oak Ridge. And they signed the pledge not to drop the bomb, but to drop a demonstration bomb. That's the story.
So what did you end up doing for your career?
I got my bachelor's degree in metallurgy in 1950. Great. I'll go back to Bethlehem Steel. Oops, no way. They said since I was an ex-employee and a regular employee, I could not get into the training program. So if I couldn't get a training program, no luck. I tried several schools. I could get Muhlenberg, but I could only get half credits. I was accepted by Penn State, no living quarters. And the only one that I could live and go to school was Lehigh. And then when I got my degree, I ended up working for a large pharmaceutical company. And that was my life's career.
Did your service in the military and the Manhattan Project, do you feel have any impact on your career or how you thought of your career?
I know it had apparently no effect one way or the other. I know I had to write an essay to get into Lehigh, and I think it's because I might have talked on previously. There was one there that fit into my category. I wrote what they did with it, I have no idea. At first, most of us veterans in the 50, I'll say the 393rd, we didn't talk too much. We were at our first reunion in Chicago. And I think it's around our 25th anniversary. And the first reunion we had, only flyers were invited. Then there's one in, I think the first one was 1960. 62 was in New York City. A few more of the flyers were invited and spouses could come. And this way it just kept growing. And up until the 70th, I only missed either 2 or 3. When we really started talking in 1995, that's when we first started to collect written remarks. And then it went from that to photographs, and I exchanged photographs with some people. I sent articles. In fact, I still send articles up until recently to the man who has run our reunions. I still send stuff up to Lehigh. But there's no restrictions.
So you enjoyed keeping in touch with your crew members in the 509th and going to the reunions?
Once I got bitten, I did my best to go. I enjoyed them all. And I enjoyed going to the different air shows, gun shows, military shows, either talking or signing our book. This is the book.
Can you hold it up a little higher so we can see it? Ah, yes, The 509th Remembered by Bob and Amelia Krause. That's a great book.
All right. I don't know how many I signed, and I sold privately quite a few. I remember I had one order for 18. Of course, that was a nephew of mine. Gave them out for gifts. But this has been good, and I have 4 pages in there. Did you read them?
I have, yes. They're really great.
I figured you had a source for some of the questions.
That and Richard Campbell's book on the 509th was also very helpful.
I've given most of my stuff to Lehigh. Wasn't planning that way, but just turned out that way.
That's great. So would you see Colonel Tibbets at these reunions?
He passed away in 2008. And the ones he used to attend, he was not a friendly man. If you did your job, he left you alone. If you didn't do your job, he was on your tail. While we're still at Wendover in our training program, suggestion was made as the navigators had to go into the CNT trainers. They ought to put the pilots through the pilot trainers. And since the navigators also spent time in the pilot trainers, shouldn't the pilots spend time in the navigator trainers? So they decided someone had to tell the pilots, co-pilots, how to navigate. I know of 3 captain navigators that we had. Who ended up getting the job? Me. I don't know why.
Do you have any idea why you were recruited to be part of the 393rd and the 509?
We don't know why or how Tibbets decided to select the 393rd. But I like to think that one of the reasons, he was told he could have any outfit he wanted. If he was looking for overwater navigators, he found them, because there weren't so many of them.
You said you greatly admired Captain Marquardt.
Yes.
What was he like?
Again, he was a good taskmaster. He had basically the same attitude that most do your job, I'll let you alone. you don't do your job right, you're gone.
Was there any jealousy among members of the 509th for those who got to fly on the strike plane, or those who got to participate on the mission? Or did everybody just feel like we did our jobs?
I can't answer that one. I just can't say that I hurt anybody. I know a lot of people couldn't wait to get out of the service, but that was normal.
At Wendover, did you interact with Colonel Heflin at all? He was the Wendover base commander.
No. We were told his base is the 509th.
When you were in Tinian, did you interact with the scientific observers at all, or the New York Times reporter William Lawrence, who was there?
I knew who Lawrence was, but never really spent time with him. The only scientist I spent time with was the one who flew with us on August 6th and pushed the button on the camera. I saw him one other time after the service.
So I assume when you were at Wendover and Tinian, you hadn't heard the term Manhattan Project or realized how big it was?
No. Tibbets had it so set up that there was no interaction between us. In fact, I've been told that when Tibbet left our air base and he had a meeting with a scientist, he did not go from Wendover to the scientific base. He went at least 1 or 2 stops before, and he ended up taking off his Air Corps emblems and putting on a Corps of Engineers.
Did you meet Captain William D. Parsons on Tinian?
No. The flyers sort of kept to themselves, the scientists sort of kept to themselves.
What would you say some of the greatest challenges were during your time on Tinian or on the missions?
Well, I'll say it's the most memorable one that I can come up with. We interchanged with each other to learn each other's job. Well, one day it was our turn, my crew, to practice with a tail gun. Though that was the only one we had. We went up there flying. We were making 8s in Salt Lake Desert. And all of a sudden, it was announced that the gunnery position was open. My co-pilot, my pilot, George, goes to take the gun. And left the co-pilot there. So I sat in the pilot's seat. Next thing you know, Jim Anderson's gone. Back to the Bombardier sits in them. We're flying for the LSA. And all of a sudden I heard psst, psst, psst. Looked out the window, number 3 engine. And no complimentary words, but I told the pilot to get his fanny up front as fast as possible. And I asked the engineer to give me full throttle I was climbing up to 10,000 feet. And when the pilot came up, I said, "What's wrong? What are you going to do about it?" So I had to go through this whole rigmarole, telling the flight engineer, check the other engines. Oh. Then step by step, I had to bring it down. And I thank God that I was able to do it all and bring it in.
You must have kept a pretty calm head on you then to be able to do that.
Well, I spent a fair amount of time in it. Nobody could understand the navigator. Nobody understood the bombardier, except another one. But pilots, they just seemed to have the knack for it. I could fly before, but I just couldn't do the landing in the right time and sequence. I couldn't, well, to this day I have double vision. I don't know if I had double vision then or not, but I didn't know what I had. Right now, since I don't have these glasses on, I see two of you.
When you
I
were
see two of him now.
when you were at Wendover, were you and your crew members eager to get to the Pacific to fight, or were you content to be there during training?
We wanted to get into active service. After all, that's what most flyers, I'll put most officer flyers, enlisted to fly. Enlisted men, I have no idea. Because every time you thought to fly, you're ready to go up.
Now, do you remember where you were, how you reacted when you heard about the bombing of Pearl Harbor?
Oh, I remember that. We were on an overnight Boy Scout camping trip. And we're coming down one of the main roads in the suburbs of Allentown, down toward Freeman's Dairy, where somebody stopped us. Said, "Have you boys heard?" And we did not.
Do you remember what you thought at the time? Were you eager to enlist?
Oh, that, at that time I was still in high school, I believe. Yes.
And do you remember where you were when you heard about D-Day?
Yes. I was stationed at Boca Raton to learn radar. And one day I went down, took some exercise, because I felt I could use it. But I didn't know I wasn't on the list to be required to take PT. But the next day when I went down there, or the next time I went down there, I was questioned where I was the day before. He said, "You weren't here." I said, "No, I'm not scheduled to." He said, "Yes, you are." He said, "I'm going to put you on report." Well, my report was that I had a service officer of the day. I think that's the title, which meant I had to go into duty about 8 o'clock at night till the next morning. And they showed me a book which says, read this so you know what your jobs are in case anything comes up. Well, the word came in, the landing has occurred. And I said, well, what am I supposed to do? He said, it says over right there. I said, why don't you make the call? He said, it's in your instructions, not mine. So I had the pleasure to call the base commander about 2 o'clock in the morning, getting a bawling out for waking him until I told him D-Day started. Then he dismissed me, and that was it.
So looking back now, how do you feel still about the decision to drop the bomb on Japan?
I think we had to drop it. We had no choice. And if Truman would not have given the okay, he was in trouble. He could have been a candidate for assassination.
And how do you feel about your role in the missions in the 509 looking back?
I enjoyed them. At times I would discuss it, couldn't do something right or didn't fit into my schedule, but generally I had a good military career.
And you mentioned that you've ridden in Fifi and other B-29.
Yes, I had a ride in Fifi, the navigator's seat in Reading, Pennsylvania. Brought back a lot of memories.
That must have been quite thrilling to be back in a B-29.
It was thrilling.
Do you have any other stories you'd like to share? Otherwise, I think you've answered everything I've asked.
Offhand, really no, nothing special.
I guess finally, because I thought it was a nice story, could you tell us about the time the Tampa Bay Buccaneers invited you to be their guest?
Well, I don't know who was responsible, but they have a system at the Bucs game for the hero of the day. Somehow they got my name. I was contacted and told that I was invited to be the hero of the day, and I was number 7. I, with an accompaniment, went to Bucks Field, had to contact a certain woman who then took charge and saw that I followed the schedule. First thing she did was she said, we're a little early yet, but she took me to a little cafeteria and told I could have anything I wanted. And later on she came in and says, there's somebody waiting for you, wants to meet you. I said, who? She says, I don't know who it is, but it's an officer. So pretty soon somebody popped in the door, he's coming. Oh, and she said, oh, you'll see who it is pretty soon. It turned out to be Dempsey, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He said he asked me a few questions, congratulated me. I congratulated him becoming a 4-star General Chief of Staff, and we sort of went our own way. And I was taken for a walk behind this grandstand to an entrance to the Pirates' room. And when I got there, I was told that my job was going to be to start the game. I said, what? To start the game. Well, anyway, he told me that the mate of the pirate ship was going to start things off, and at a certain point in there, we don't know the exact words anymore. He says, "You ring the bell." Now this was shown on television in a stadium, but never on television for the public. And then I was escorted in. I went to the owner's suite. I did two things. I had all the food I wanted to eat at any time, and the suite was on the 50-yard line. We had a beautiful view of the game, so I watched the game there. And not only that, was the 4-star general came in and visited for a while and watched the ball game also. And at the end, I ended up with a ball, football.